Good afternoon, y'all. Good morning. I guess it's now technically afternoon. Thanks all for joining us. Really excited. We'll give sort of folks another couple seconds here to get into systems. Super excited about the group, both the attendees and sort of the panelists. Excited about the conversation we're having. I guess we can probably just get started with some introductions, and then we'll sort of jump in. So Dr. Turner would love to sort of have you sort of give a little bit of overview of your background, sort of work, and then Charity would love to sort of have you do the same, just to sort of get us moving.
Hi, everyone. I am Kristen Turner, and I am in charge of all of the education programs at Drew University in Morris County in the northern part of New Jersey. I started out as an English and social studies teacher here in Morris County in the last decade, which is something that I have been saying recently and realizing how old I actually am. But now that I am over a quarter of a century into my education career, I'm really thinking about issues that are more systemic and perpetual across the state. And so that's why I'm here today to talk about the diversity gap.
And good morning. I'm Charity Comella. I'm the Assistant Superintendent for Personnel at the West Windsor-Plainsboro Regional School District in Mercer County, New Jersey. And I'm also the proud president of NJ Stride, which is a large statewide consortium of public school districts all working together to diversify staff within our schools. I started out as an educator in Pennsylvania many years ago, 25 years ago, and worked in various districts, and then came to New Jersey and was in East Brunswick, New Jersey for 12 years before I came to West Windsor-Plainsboro, and I've been here for 10 years. And I'm thrilled to collaborate and work and take all of my background and experience in private and public sector work and have them culminate together in this great work that we're doing today.
Love it. So as y'all can see on the screen, right, we're sort of really here to talk about how we're closing the diversity gap and really sort of talk about what that looks like, what that means. Super excited about the conversation, just knowing that this has been, right, pretty systemic, right, sort of in how we're sort of organizing at prep and how we think about sort of recruitment. And there's sort of a really, interesting set of implications here, long-term for students, long-term obviously for staff and teachers. And so excited just from a housekeeping standpoint. There's a Q&A and there's a chat sort of function in there. So if you have questions, please feel free to post them. I will try and sort of open up time for Q&A and then we'll sort of come back to questions. But if you have them, you can feel free to enter them into the chat. We are recording this, so we'll send out the recording afterwards as well. So hopefully you don't have to take notes and can sort of listen in and help contribute to the conversation. Thought it'd be helpful, Charity, if we can sort of kick us off here, and let me sort of take this off just so it's not distracting. But really want to sort of dig into sort of talk about, like, set the scene for us, sort of how we got here. Obviously, sort of a little bit of background and sort of what you're seeing from the district standpoint. I'm really interested in sort of how the sort of the NJ Stride sort of works coming together around this. So give us a little of the lay of the land of what you're seeing so far today.
Sure. As I mentioned, I have experience out of state as well as in state. One of the most startling facts about New Jersey is that we are over 600 school districts, all different types, but we're unique compared to the rest of the country because we are so locally controlled within our small districts. Some of our districts are large, some of them are very small, but our state in general is diverse, not just with the people who live here, but our districts and the sizes of our districts and the needs of our students and our districts across the state. So it's very diverse working in New Jersey. And when we think about coming into public education, we just in general think about why we entered the work. Usually we can identify those who inspired us. It could have been a teacher, it could have been a coach, it could have been someone that we saw and could see ourselves in, or it could have been someone who saw us and recognized potential and growth. And here we are in these roles where we are deservedly so impacting students to the best so that they can be the best that they can be. And we have to remember that for students to aspire to something, they have to be inspired. And a lot of times it comes from seeing someone who looks like them or is like them or can see them for the potential that they bring. So, when we think about that and we think about the statistics in education, nationally, 80% of teachers are, about 84% of teachers are white, and Hispanic, maybe 30%. And Hispanic about 8%, and Black is about 6% and Asian is 2%. But when you take a look at student demographics, which have been changing drastically, especially over the 20 years, where teacher statistics have not been changing very drastically, the student demographics have almost done an inverse of that. So with students, you have 32% of students in New Jersey are Hispanic and Black, 15%, 10% Asian, and that's about 40% students that are white. And we're going to see those numbers continuing to shift more and more. And that's specific just to our state, rapidly changing. But when we look at the numbers for our educators, we're not seeing that change. As a matter of fact, the greater the percentage of diverse students that we see, it seems to be the less likely that they will see representation of themselves, because there's a complete inverse of representation of students in the state. So not only are we not seeing students seeing representation of themselves in their teachers or variety of demographics across their classrooms and different school positions, we're going through one of the worst staffing shortages that we've seen. It started before the pandemic came into effect, but certainly after the pandemic, we've had a lot of staff members who have left the profession. And we are also noticing at our local universities that people are less and less more likely to major in education. And it's dire. I mean, some of our areas that we are required by law to make sure that we have programs in for students who wish to enroll in certain programs, we are seeing less and less students even available at the university levels that can be hired for these positions. One of our local universities completely eliminated their health and PE program. Their STEM program was eliminated. We're really happy to see that they reinstated a Spanish program. So maybe now we can look forward to having some Spanish educators after some time come through the pipeline. But we know of only one eligible German teaching candidate in the state that can be hired. I mean, that just goes to show you, and all 600 districts are going to be fighting over this candidate. So working with NJ STRIDE, which stands for New Jersey Statewide Program for the Recruitment of Diverse Educators, working with my colleagues in 90 school districts across the state that represent, at one time at least, represented every county in the state of New Jersey, and is now an affiliate of NJASA, which is New Jersey Association of School Administrators. We're very proud to have also that connection and partnership. We unite together to do a lot of work and on focusing specifically on how can we not only recruit more diverse educators, but retain them in our schools. And this is no small task for our consortium to be able to do. But we find that when we work in tandem together, we do work together, we capitalize on our diverse perspectives and our diverse ways of operating within our district. When we come together, we're finding that we are able to still be able to move forward in our progress, which leads us to our new name. We just rebranded ourselves. We're now NJ STRIDE. Up until just a few months ago, we were always known for 20 years as CJ Pride's. It used to be Central Jersey program for the recruitment of diverse educators. And we've just exponentially expanded over the past, I'd say, especially 8 years. Have we grown tremendously. But going back 20 years, our consortium was just 8 school districts. And now, we're 10 times as large. And again, representative of the state. And this has been monumental that we've been able to work together to help each other, because looking for diverse staff, finding diverse educators and keeping them, this staffing shortage has been something that's always been there. So a staffing shortage has never been, it's not new for this type of work. We're happy to be able to use what we know about improving diversity in our schools and to keep us focused, even though times are more challenging than we've seen before.
Yeah, really interesting. I think obviously the more we find sort of districts coming together, the more we find they're just sort of easier to sort of help figure out how to solve some of these more gnarly, more entrenched issues. Kristen, I'm sort of interested in your ledge from the EPP side. Obviously you're seeing similar demographics, similar sort of shifts, similar sort of questions on sort of the broader trend. Just sort of interested if you can sort of give a bit of a summary in terms of what you've seen from the Drew's lens in terms of the EPP side of things, and then really sort of talk a little bit about that disparity and sort of what that looks like in terms of how y'all are trying to help.
Right. So from a teacher education perspective, we sit between the schools that Charity is working with and the state of New Jersey. And so we commiserate with our K-12 colleagues, and I love the work that NJ Stride does. We are doing similar things as EPPs or educator preparation programs across the state, trying to work together to solve the problem. And then we are also beholden to regulations and laws that come out of the state in how teachers are prepared. So I think one of the issues that has been ongoing, particularly in the state of New Jersey, which, by the way, is one of the best states in the nation for educating K-12 students, what we do here is great, and how we prepare teachers is great. And that doesn't mean there isn't room for improvement, particularly when we think about how to recruit more diverse teachers to the pipeline. But there are barriers to the teaching profession that exist in the state of New Jersey and across the nation. But since we're talking about New Jersey today, big elephant in the room is the cost of higher education. You need a bachelor's degree to become a teacher. And I'm not saying that's wrong. Like, that's part of why New Jersey is great, because we have high expectations of our teachers. But the cost of higher education is a barrier. There are testing requirements in the state of New Jersey that have traditionally been a barrier to potential teachers of color in particular. We know that there are biases in standardized tests. And so these are some of the things that the educator preparation programs have been advocating for and about together collectively. We've been working with our K-12 school partners about this. And actually, there's been some movement in the state of New Jersey over the last year. We've had legislation passed that has removed the high stakes EdTPA performance assessment, which I know our K-12 colleagues are very happy about. And then just recently, there's legislation passed about the basic skills assessment as well. And so we're looking to reduce some of the barriers while still maintaining the high quality and excellence of teacher preparation in the state. The state has also really recognized, and when I say the state, I mean the New Jersey Department of Education. They've recognized this disparity, the diversity gap. And they, a couple of years ago, created what they called the Diversity Collaborative. It's a diversifying the teacher pipeline, where they brought educator preparation providers together to have conversations about what we could do from the higher ed side. And it was a voluntary thing, but I think we had 11 educator preparation programs participate. Drew was one of them. And what we did for that year was conduct a self-study. What can we do as teacher preparation programs to be more inviting, to open up the pipeline, to recruit more diverse candidates into our programs, so that we are then turning out more candidates for the K-12 schools that Charity is working with. And so Drew did participate in this self-study of our own. And ironically, Drew's undergraduate population is known for being diverse. We have 46% of our undergraduate population does not identify as white, filling in all of the other statistics that Charity shared. We're pretty actually representative of what a New Jersey student body might look like across the state. However, at Drew, we have a Master of Arts in Teaching program. So it's a 5-year program into that certification, which has a lot of benefits for a lot of reasons. But what we noticed in our self-study is that 72% of our MAT program identified as white. So there's even a disconnect between the students coming to Drew undergraduate and the students continuing on to become a teacher out of our own program. So one of the things we looked at is the attractiveness of our program, and we actually did curricular study and made curricular implementations to make our program more attractive to candidates of color. And then we were also thinking about other barriers that there might be to accessing our MAT program. So when we're talking about the cost of higher education, just having a 4-year degree is not accessible to a lot of people in the state of New Jersey. And then to add that 5th year, that master's degree onto that is even more perhaps out of reach. We've done as much as we can with tuition and, reducing the costs of all that, working with our K-12 partners by thinking outside the box. How can we have our partners hire our MAT interns as paraprofessionals so that they have some income? We've been doing a lot to think outside these boxes, but we recognize that we need to do even more from the university side, maybe think outside the box even further. And so I think that's one of the things that we're trying to do right now.
Love it. And yeah, it's certainly interesting just seeing sort of the broader lens. I think what we've seen this again in other states quite a bit, which is right there, this disconnect between we've now, for decades, society basically told young white women that teaching was the best profession and that's where they should go. And I think we've seen now the last couple decades, really open up sort of a whole new sort of spectrum of, there are lots of different opportunities, lots of different careers to go into, and that has been great for, sort of people in sort of exploring other careers. But I don't think we've sort of been really effective in sort of trying to change some of the just societal narrative around teaching as a good, strong place to really impact kids. And I think that's one of the missed opportunities that we sort of continue to find. I'm interested sort of, Charity, as you think about sort of just the strategies and some of the things that sort of CJ Pride and NJ Stride have sort of now been really sort of finding success with in that candidate pool, I'm just sort of interested in what you've seen as most helpful, What are the sort of ways you've been sort of trying to sort of target and trying to create some of the affinity sort of spaces and the like, to really sort of help candidates and help sort of attract and really sort of help sort of bring new folks into the profession. Oh, I think you might still be on. No. Kristen, can you hear her? Or is that just me?
No, I remember we had this the other day too. Something going on with the mic.
Maybe if you jump out and jump back in.
Right, hold on. Charity?
Do you hear anything?
There we go.
Oh, you're back.
Look at that. Look at that. See, I just wish for it and it happens, right? That's what I'm hoping with all of our work together. So let me know though if you hear me go out again, okay? So I think when you're working on this, it really goes back to how education has changed. You could find some of the teacher statistics have changed going back to Roe versus Wade when schools desegregated. That's really what happened. So we may have had teachers of color more in the schools for students of color. But then when schools became desegregated, what ended up happening was the staff that were not the non-colored staff were the ones who remained employed, and it just sort of stayed that way. It became more and more difficult for educators of color to even get back into the pipeline in the same way. So our focus is to try to NJ Stride's focus is to really try to overcome some of those barriers, and there are so many barriers to try to become an educator in New Jersey. We had, as you had mentioned, Dr. Turner, you had mentioned EdTPA, that was a barrier, and we had a lot to say about that. We were thrilled when that was removed because these additional testing requirements and videotaping and different kinds of alignments were really causing an issue. We have a residency requirement. We have the high cost of all the different tests that have to be taken by students. There's just numerous layers of difficulty when we're trying to get staff, not to mention our universities. In many of our districts, and I'm really happy to hear the statistics about Drew University's demographics, but most of the time we're finding in the teacher education programs, there's not a lot of diversity in those programs. And if we want to find universities that do, a lot of times we'll look for historically Black colleges and universities. So when we look for the HBCUs, none of them are in New Jersey. There's not a single HBCU in New Jersey or New York, so you have to reach out, cast a net way far out of state, and then trying to convince somebody why they should come to New Jersey and they hear how difficult it is. That's been the challenge. So NJ Stride has, the way that NJ Stride is structured is that we have several committees. All of our member districts serve on a committee, and we work in tandem on different missions to help try to have influence for positive change so that we can get more diverse educators in the state. We have a scholarship committee where we, for all of 90 of our member districts, any of the high school students that wish to apply for the NJ Stride scholarship is eligible, and we have a competitive process, and we use our consortium funds to help award scholarships to students who wish to go into university programs, which would be great, let's say for a Drew University or for any of our local universities. And then we encourage them to come back and to apply to one of our 90 school districts. We have an outreach and marketing program that reaches out to all 107 HBCUs as well as local universities to see what we can do to try to keep our educator candidates involved in our job fair. We have a huge virtual job fair every spring where all of our districts just about are represented. And it's a virtual platform, so candidates can apply from everywhere. We even have sometimes international candidates that are interested, that are seeking employment in the US. They have an opportunity to come to this one event where there's so much access to our districts. We have a legislative committee where our members are very involved in trying to help move forward or overturn barriers. Some of that work was, again, instrumental for the elimination of EdTPA or some changes for praxis. Our legislative committee is fabulous, and it's very important for us to make sure that we're paying attention to laws that impact our schools and to see how we can positively have a voice when decisions are being made. We have a recruitment committee that specifically works on ways that we can reach out and seek our candidates and to attract them to, especially our job fair, but to other events that are going on within our districts. And we also have a professional development and best practices committee that meets to talk about what are some things that are working for us, what are some things that we recommend. We provide presentations, we participate in discussions such as this as much as we can to educate each other, as well as educate those who are interested in what they can do, as well as a new membership committee for any new member districts that want to know how they can get better involved. So our work together in tandem is beyond anything that we could have done individually within our own districts. It's tremendous to get the energy together and to learn from each other. I'd like to tell you a little bit about some of the influences that I've learned from my colleagues in NJ Stride that I've been able to utilize in the district where I work, West Windsor-Plainsboro. We have a very progressive, forward-thinking superintendent, Dr. David Outerhold, who's very involved in all of these areas himself, just at the superintendent level. But a lot of these recommendations that we share within our NJ Stride meetings and collaborative initiatives we'll bring back, and we do implement some of them. And so one of them is we do participate in the scholarship program, of course, for NJ Stride. Another is we have implemented a Pathways to Teaching program in our district. We have it was arranged through the bargaining process for negotiations with our support staff, where we have a program where if they would like to enroll with one of our partner universities, they're able to, if they enroll with the university and they're pre-approved, they can get assistance from the university on getting a teaching certification, which the district will reimburse them up to 4 classes per year, 4 3-credit classes per year, which is really wonderful because we do find that we have a lot of diversity in our support staff, particularly our instructional assistants, who do aspire to become teachers. And this is a way for them to do it while they're also working within our schools directly with our students. That's been, so far I have 5 instructional assistants that have been benefiting from that, and we're watching them flourish and grow in their roles as instructional assistants, but also we are hopeful that they will, when they obtain their teacher certification, that they would be great candidates for us as well, to work with our students as teachers.
Love it.
One newest initiative that we have in West Windsor-Plainsboro that I'm very proud of is called the New Teacher Program. We call it TNTP, and that is a paid student teaching internship. We are one of the only that I'm aware of in the state that uses district funds to actually provide stipends for student teachers that apply and are selected for our program. We have 23 students right now in our district. They're very happily working with a cooperating teacher. They're learning on the job, but they also will receive a stipend. Many of them are receiving $5,000 and some of them are receiving a $10,000 stipend twice. They'll get one payment next month and they'll have one before they finish student teaching. It's a wonderful way to, of course, attract student teachers to our program, but not only that, we provide professional development. We have a series of professional development that they're required to come to. We set them up with how-tos, like Teaching 101 is one course that we just had with them, and building classroom culture, and we give them a course on professional conduct, and we also have a series on preparing for employment so that they are best prepared to work. And, we do believe that the investment that we put into them, as well as our instructional assistants, as well as our, students that are looking to go into scholarship programs, these are the things that really, make people. It reminds me of what I mentioned earlier about when you think about why you went into education in the first place, it was because probably somebody saw the spark, the value in you. And we try very hard to make sure that we're doing that with our work with NJ Stride, as well as our work within our individual districts.
Love it. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I think we sort of have a bunch of these different conversations, and as you're sort of speaking, it's sort of helpful to sort of just try to categorize where these big challenges come from, right? So we know cost is one, and right, if we want a more diverse workforce, right, we have to figure out how to sustainably manage and fund and support that. And so certainly the scholarships, paid student teaching, right, sort of internships, sort of things like that are super helpful. I think the other 2 or 3 that we sort of come up with quite a bit is just time and recognizing, right, the traditional models, right, are built pretty much around a 20-year-old at prep pool, right? That's been the sort of way we've always relied on sort of the traditional sort of candidate pool. And then I think, there's a question in the chat that we can talk to and come back to around certification barriers, right? There's definitely logistical barriers. And then really, I think the final sort of big bucket is, right, what are the sort of stigma, or what's the sort of the community of practice of sort of the affinity spaces that we're creating for people to sort of have that. Dr. Turner, I'm interested, given the work that we're doing, given some of the things, how are you all thinking about sort of these sort of new, more innovative programs and trying to address some of these big barriers, and what's that been looking like so far?
Well, first of all, I love that West Windsor-Plainsboro has invested in interns, because this is something that Drew has been working with our partners for a very long time to try to say, these are not just students in your schools, they're actually additional teachers. So we take a co-teaching model. It's an apprentice teacher, someone who's in the room providing extra support to students, and schools should want that. Plus, schools should want to train this person to hire, especially in today's day and age. So providing them with some kind of living expense really helps with that. Ultimately, let's put more qualified teachers in the classroom. So kudos to you for investing in that. I know a lot of my partners have said the reason they can't do that is because of collective bargaining agreements. And so I think it's interesting to hear how schools are working through that. And I think some of the other innovative work we're trying to do is also going to push districts to think about funding and where they might find funding sources for similar kinds of programs. One of the things that we've been thinking about at Drew is the difference between a traditional undergraduate candidate or a traditional MAT candidate, and trying to think about how we open our programming to a whole other population of potential teachers, and particularly teachers who are already teaching. They're already in the classroom. They just haven't reached those benchmarks of certification. So in particular, paraprofessionals who often work in the district. They have a lot of outside of school, outside of work responsibilities that would limit their ability to, well, first of all, they wouldn't be able to do a traditional undergraduate program that happens during the workday on a traditional college campus, like a lot of programs are. And secondly, even if we're thinking about moving our courses online, and our MAT program has done a lot of that just to open up access so our interns can be placed further away from us and things like that, it still is a set time that that a lot of paraprofessionals just don't have that time or the potential financial resources to pay upfront in order to be reimbursed by, through a collective bargaining agreement. So we're trying to think through some of these things in partnership with BloomBoard as we revise Drew's programs to think about them being more on the job. And in particular, we have developed an on-the-job bachelor's degree program where paraprofessionals can get their bachelor's degrees through work that they are already doing in the classroom. So with a school district support to allow them maybe a little bit more free time in how they are using their time during the day, they can meet the requirements of their graduate or their undergraduate coursework through demonstrating the competencies and skills and knowledge and dispositions that they are already showing in their job situation. And so we're thinking about grow your own programs that are really on the job based with a traditional curriculum that is preparing them to be the best teachers that they can be in those situations. When we're thinking about this, we're thinking about different populations of potential teachers. So sometimes we have people who've graduated from an undergraduate program and they don't yet have their certification. So how can we meet their needs in an on-the-job format? We're thinking about people who have graduated from community college with an associate's degree, but haven't finished out that bachelor's degree. How can we level them up into the bachelor's degree with certification at that level? We're thinking about people who don't have any college credit, or maybe didn't get the associate's degree, but have somewhere between 0 and 60 credits. How do we level them into a bachelor's degree and then certification? And then in addition to that, we're thinking about those high need cert areas. So we know we need math teachers desperately. We need science teachers desperately. Special education teachers, which is an add-on certificate in New Jersey. So not only do you have to get the bachelor's degree and one of those other certifications, you have to go back and get your special education certificate in order to teach. So we are really thinking through all of those things and how to move candidates as quickly as possible into the certification space so that they are available to their schools beyond that paraprofessional role. And so that's where we're at here, and we're making progress very quickly in all of that.
Yeah, it's a really interesting sort of time. I guess I think what we've learned, and we've been talking about the shortage and vacancies for now several years, obviously post-COVID, and a lot of the hiring, and now sort of some of the rifts and other things that have happened sort of post-ESSER. I will say, like, the thing we've probably learned most, that now we have really strong data, is that we actually should not have a teacher shortage. And that may sound crazy, and that may sound sort of a little weird, right? But the data shows, right, when we've now surveyed tens of thousands of paras and sort of folks in our schools, right, across the country, and we work from everything from, right, sort of Palm Beach in Florida, right, several of the largest Charlotte, several of the largest districts in the country, several of tiny rural districts, right? Over and over again, we find that there are a very, very large percentage of people in the community already that would like to be fully certified and would like to be teachers. So we do not have a teacher shortage from a want and from a desire and from an interest standpoint. We have a shortage from a barriers to entry, barriers to access standpoint. And that really does come down to this idea of, right, what are the time constraints that we're putting on candidates? What are the ways that employers and districts can accommodate those candidates? And frankly, we're already seeing Amazon and Target start to try and solve this on their own, right? I saw a superintendent a couple months ago in Texas who said that even Buc-ee's, right, the fast food chain in Texas, on their front marquee sign now has signs that say, if you're a teacher, come work here, we'll pay you more and put you on a management track. And that's, if fast food restaurants and chains are now trying to recruit teachers away, right, we know that we're in a pretty competitive space. And I think what we're starting to realize, and what certainly Amazon and Target and Starbucks have realized, is that the ability to create more sort of advancement as a benefit programs is going to be the key to attracting and retaining and building your future workforce. And I think the pitch then for districts is, how do you compete with that? And are there ways that you can say, not just, if you're going to go stock shelves at Target, one, that's not a great feeling job, right? That's pretty, laborious and pretty sort of boring. And if they're going to buy you a bachelor's degree, you're still going to do that nights and weekends. And so the idea that we can sort of create ways where districts can start to position advancement and degrees inside of the job and say, yeah, come work for us as a para, right? You're going to get a ton of the learning about what it means to really be great with kids and really impact kids' lives. And you can get a degree on the job integrated into your workplace. That's a crazy shift. And so we have already started to see districts actually create 100, 200, 400 person wait lists for programs, because there's so much interest from within the community that it's really about sort of trying to help navigate those structures and trying to figure out, what does it look like to sort of really drive and sort of strengthen that pipeline. And so it's just been an interesting sort of context more broadly about that. Charity, I know we've had a whole bunch of conversations about some of these challenges. I'm sort of interested, as you think about navigating CBAs, navigating some of these sort of time cost sort of requirements, what have you all seen be sort of creative in the process, and how does that sort of fit in terms of sort of where it goes? Because I know it's always easy to be like, well, my CBA doesn't really allow for that, but we definitely, like, you all have already started breaking down some of those barriers. And so what are your senses of sort of how that looks, and sort of what are some of those challenges, and how are you trying to sort of combat them? No, I think we lost you again. I don't know what you did last time. We just sort of
Sometimes when I talk, then we can hear her again.
Yeah, let's see.
That's the answer.
All right.
Hey,
So
that is
from
the
now
answer. Here we
on,
go.
Dr. Turner needs to stay with me on all Zoom calls, okay?
All Zoom calls.
Thank you very much. In my district where I work, West Windsor-Plainsboro, I always tell everybody that it really stands for we work with people, right? I think at the end of the day, that's number one. You have to remember we're working with people, we're educating people. So there's a lot of opinions about who should be educating our most precious, right? Everyone knows that that child is somebody's, that everything that's the center of everyone's family is that baby or that little third grader, right? Or that high school student that's about to go off into college. There is tremendous feelings about that. And people get a little nervous when you're thinking about changing standards for, what do you mean? You're not going to require them to have, what do you mean you're going to lower a GPA? What do you mean you're going to take away a recommendation for a certain testing? So sometimes when we get into the discussion about removing barriers, there's a feeling of, but whoever is going into the room, and this is not Target, these are not tissue boxes on a shelf, these are children, right? So there's the piece of making sure that you still keep rigorous standards, that we still have the best candidates, right? And even when we're talking about looking for our most diverse, it's not that we're just looking for people who are diverse, we're looking for excellent teachers. We're just asking to consider that our pool is wider in considering our search for those excellent teachers, which do span across other backgrounds besides maybe the places where we've been looking. So it goes the same thing for our collective bargaining agreement, with our associations. These are people, right? So our unions, our associations, there are a lot of protections that have been built into their contracts that they feel very protective about. So I think when you're having conversations with your associations about, hey, I'd like to be able to help remedy this issue, I'd like to be able to mitigate this a bit. A lot of times it comes through the relationships that you have with the staff, explain how to benefit the actual members in the organization. This will be a benefit to the other, instructional assistants, because this will help us because we don't have anybody to teach those sections, and if we're able to hire people, then, more easily, then we're going to be able to not have to ask teachers to cover classes, or to do even more work because their colleagues are out or somebody had to go on leave and there was no one there for them. So a lot of it has to do with the relationships, the investments, and the conversations that you have to show that it's you're working together, to benefit the students. This is not about anyone trying to make more money or less money or take money away, but we also have to work within our approved school budgets, and we have to be able to do it in a way that you can foresee. You heard me mention that we have a paid student teaching program, and that we have an agreement that we will reimburse instructional assistants or support staff for our pathways programs with local universities or further away universities. We have those things in place, but a lot of that comes from strategically knowing what, how many staff do we anticipate will be retiring. We know this ahead of time. We're not just waiting and saying, oh, I had no idea that this year we were going to have an additional 10% of staff leaving. We already know all the time, okay, so we anticipate that we're going to have this many vacancies because we know that we have this many people that could retire, that are eligible for retirement, or just because maybe of conversations that we've had with them. When we know that ahead of time and we think about the cost of programs such as a Pathways to Teaching program or a student teacher paid program, when you think about what it will cost to give a stipend to somebody who's most likely going to be entering in on the lower part of the salary guide, it offsets the fear a lot of times. And that can help with our conversations with our associations, because we can say, well, this is why we'll get more staff members that are able to enter, and it's not going to be as competitive, and it shouldn't have too much impact on those. It could be really a tribute and an honor to the staff that have dedicated themselves for 20 plus years.
And I really think a lot of it goes back to this point of, right, the more you're investing in your community, right, the more you find that sort of folks really do appreciate that honoring and that investing, right? And that creates a level of loyalty and actually can change some of the narrative we find around some of the teacher bashing that happens, which is, this is a way to really start to sort of talk through and share why districts are investing in valuing staff. And I think Daniela put a question in the quotes about sort of the rising cost of housing. The other beauty of a more sort of community-centric approach is that you actually already have people who live in your community, right? And so we're doing this in Miami-Dade and in Palm Beach, and we're doing this in some incredibly high-cost areas. And the beauty of doing in high-cost areas, part of the problem is, right, if you're recruiting from outside New Jersey, you're asking somebody who might not be able to sort of afford the housing, right, market to then come in and try and deal with that at that first year salary level, right? Or sort of at a level that just doesn't make sense. Whereas if you already have somebody who's been in your schools, who's grown up in your schools, who already, right, is employed in the district or already has kids in the district, they've already solved the housing problem one way or another. And so then it really comes down to sort of how do we sort of create conditions that can sort of really embed in their existing lives, even if they have a second job or a third job or other, sort of kids at home, how do we sort of make that work? And what does that logistically look like? Dr. Turner, I'm interested in sort of your lens on, like, from a logistical standpoint. I know we talked a whole bunch about, it is a little weird to talk about sort of more job embedded approaches to support and learning and what that looks like from a portfolio standpoint. I'm just interested in sort of your thoughts on sort of how you all have seen that, right, sort of change, and as you're sort of designing some of that work in the courses, what does that look like from just a sort of the mental model of, right, a traditional EPP standpoint?
Yeah, I would say that our program has always been clinically rich. And I know a lot of programs might say that, but we literally have field connected components to every course because we are a 1-year MAT program. They are in their internship for most of that year. And we actually do a summer field experience where they are in ESYs or other programs in the summer. So they are with students, and we can legitimately say, here's what you're learning in the university. Now go do this in the classroom and bring that back to us as evidence that you've actually learned it. And so that model of it's always connected to the field has really been translated into what does it mean if you are always in the field? And then how do we move into a more asynchronous way for students to engage with content and material, apply it to the field, and then bring it back to the university to get feedback from the expert mentor at the university, while also always getting feedback from their expert mentors in the school district as well. So I would say that how it is shifting is that our partnerships and how we work, we talk about it in terms of a triangle. We've got the candidate, the university, and then the field. And so that triangle actually has to work even more closely together for the cultivation of an excellent teacher. And I think what you're saying earlier, Charity, yeah, we don't want to lower the standards. We want excellent teachers in the classroom, and there are many pathways to excellence. And so it's not just about testing that makes you excellent. There are many teachers who can demonstrate that excellence in the practice itself. And prove that they are excellent teachers in a lot of ways. So I think that just rethinking the connection between what coursework is and what practice is really the heart of what we're looking at in terms of what it means to do on the job work.
Love it. Yeah, and Charity, you mentioned that sort of the zero vacancy, right? A little hat tip to we are working on a webinar series where we've actually started working with some districts to just plan publicly, right, a zero vacancy strategic blueprint to do a lot of this sort of data investigation and try to figure out, like, it turns out you should be able to predict where and when you're going to need the vacancies, and should be able to predict sort of what that would take in terms of staffing, in terms of recruitment, in terms of sort of various pipelines. So excited about sort of that work, and we'll send some stuff out for that. Charity, I know we talked in sort of when we were sort of prepping for this a little bit about sort of, we talked about cost, we've talked about some of the time constraints. I'm interested in this sort of the stigma and the sort of the ways to sort of think about affinity in sort of spaces to sort of create better conditions for folks to retain in the profession, especially sort of diverse candidates, especially sort of candidates who already come into an environment that feel pretty singular in nature, right? And sort of there's a lot of I think we've seen a lot of the downside of sort of the tokenism that can sort of be represented in there. I'm interested in sort of how you think about it, how you all are sort of trying to sort of wrestle with that, and sort of, especially, it seems like that's an amazing place for NJ Stride to sort of be trying to play in. I'm just sort of interested in what you all are trying to do and what that looks like so far.
Oh my goodness, if I talk, does it help?
Let's see, did it work?
We figured out Zoom, who knew?
So weird.
So weird.
We secretly arranged this just to keep our listeners engaged. We figured, this will add to the experience. I'm still good, right?
You are.
Okay, good. So yes, this is actually that's a great question. Thank you, Jason. You know, NJ Stride, one of the, I mean, there's so many benefits of having the collaboration of all of the different district leaders. But one thing we know is important for all of us is professional development. We need professional development for ourselves. So, and that includes things like implicit bias, our own ability. You know, we are all impacted by our own perspectives. Right? It's a human thing to want sameness. You know, it's a normal thing. It's more likely if I go into the lunchroom and I walk in and I see you and I see Kristen, I might go sit with Kristen just because it could be because I think she's more like me, you know, gender wise, or it could be something, based on, we look for same, but that's just a normal human thing that we do. And sometimes what happens is the more times that happens, Jason's going to feel isolated and left out. He's not going to see himself represented as much as the others. And so you have to actively work to be mindful about those things. Because while it feels great for Kristen and I to be in a community in that event, we need to make sure that what we're doing is not ostracizing anyone else. And some of the strategies that we have picked up from our best practices committee and our professional development experiences together is when you do start hiring more diverse staff, you need to make sure that you're not hiring just one. You need to try to hire more than one together, because that's sometimes what happens is you have one singular person who's a first, and only something about them. They're the first ever or the only person to be something. And that is really a lot of pressure to put on that one person, because they do just by default, the other staff don't see anybody else that sort of matches their description. So you have to try to make sure that you're doing it more than once. And if you have two different members that are if you can hire two and they're near each other, they're in the same location, then you can encourage some collaboration for them or some networking for them. You can invite them to sessions where they gather together and just reflect on their experiences and what are some things that their employers can do, if they're noticing something that is happening, and to be mindful of that during their experience and to give them a safe place to be able to share that. Because they might not feel, if they feel underrepresented, they might not feel as comfortable. So many of my colleagues in other districts have implemented such things. They have special meetings, that are focused more on diverse staff. It could just be informal, where you're checking in with staff more often, asking about how it's going, how's your experiences, what do you need? And the feedback that I've personally received from staff members in my district is how much they appreciate the foresight and thinking about them and what their experiences might be. Because anybody who has felt uncomfortable that has come to me about how they felt uncomfortable because of being underrepresented, it's when we haven't done those things. It's when, we haven't checked in with them and they finally get to the point where they say, you know what, I'm leaving. I'm going to go to a more diverse school district. And that's what they do. Sometimes they will leave to go to another school district unless they see some efforts being made from their employers and from their supervisors and from their principals. So we try to educate each other on those things. And then we try to make sure that we encourage our leaders to go back and train teachers on those things about inclusivity, about especially microaggressions, things that you could say that you might not realize are very inflammatory and hurtful, and just educate ourselves and educate each other.
Yeah, and I do want to take a chance. I know we're coming up on time. So please, if you have questions, plug them into the Q&A. I want to make sure we sort of spend the last 12 minutes trying to answer as much as y'all have. It is interesting. I was talking to in sort of one of these similar conversations around sort of how to figure out how to support candidates that are coming from much more diverse backgrounds, often than the students that they're working with, right? And sort of the process. It's been really interesting sort of getting some color on just like where faculty actually, given sort of the ways that you can sort of create some much more sort of job-based feedback, can really be helpful. And I think one of the things we found is, there's definitely a ton of empathy needed for candidates, right? Coming in a first-time teaching role, right? Or getting into sort of a co-teaching, student teaching sort of like placements. And then, trying to manage students and parents, right? That have their own implicit bias, right? And have their own sort of things that they're sort of wrestling with, and trying to figure out sort of how you best sort of help those candidates. And I think often part of the issue we've had in whether it's ed prep or just in teaching in general is it's been that island sort of mentality, which is you close your door and you are on your own and good luck, right? And no matter what comes up, right? There's not a lot of sort of formal ways to sort of reach out. what I've been interested in, right, the more you start to sort of embed faculty into the job experience, right? And Kristen, I know we've talked a bunch about how sort of the faculty, right, so relationship model that you all have at Drew is pretty phenomenal. And so I'm just interested in sort of how you're sort of thinking about, because I think we've seen that play out where, you know, if candidates are producing and creating real live artifacts of their job experience every day, every week, right, and sort of working with faculty to get feedback on those, there obviously creates a ton of space in there for faculty to really sort of help support and scaffold some of these other, you know, sort of relationships. And so I'd love for you to just share sort of how you all have been thinking about sort of the faculty model and sort of the engagement and some of that sort of relationship building that you know is so important to the program, and just sort of what's that looked like so far, especially as you think about supporting candidates of color in the process.
Right. So we actually have a whole arm of our programs called Drew Teach, and Teach stands for Today's Educators Are Connected Here, because we know that if you are out in the field feeling isolated, you need that community to come back to. And so we are a Drew Writing Project, one of the National Writing Project sites that has a whole cohort of teacher consultants that keep coming back because it fuels them. Our alumni are invited to, we do professional development. Right now we're focused a lot on AI and writing, right? So we're trying to bring people to connect so that they're not left isolated. And as we move into this next phase of Drew's programming, we are thinking hard about this issue. And actually Drew as a university is thinking hard about this issue, because all institutions need to think about how institutional practices might be biased and prejudiced and not be welcoming systemically as well. And so this is kind of translating into how are we going to create space and community for a different type of candidate, a different type of student? How are we going to connect those students here? And so in terms of our courses, yes, we are actually rethinking coursework. So it's not a one professor, one course model. We are going to have a team of professors working with a cohort of students all at once, so that they're getting multiple perspectives, and then also having conversations, synchronous conversations via Zoom. You're invited to hop on and talk with each other and really debrief what's happening in the classroom, because we also know that, you know, new teachers, young teachers, paraprofessionals who might be learning on the job, yes, they have a support system on that job, but that's also a job where they are being evaluated constantly. And sometimes you just need to talk to someone in the field that's not evaluating you in terms of your performance on the job. And you need to talk through how you're learning, what you're learning, where you want to go from there. So we're creating those structures around the coursework that candidates are taking. And then we're also just hoping to invite a space where hopefully our school partners will support these candidates to come to Drew, come to campus, be in the same space with each other once a semester, get out of the school, get away from you know, everything that's going on in that day-to-day, and come and connect with each other, so that that community goes beyond just the district that they are in, where we are hoping that they're doing things like what you're talking about, Charity, within the district. But then there is also a more network throughout the state, which I think would, and connected perhaps to NJ Stride, right? Like we could think about how we can partner on this kind of work to bring a more structured network where people can come together and share their unique experiences.
Love it. Yeah, I mean, it's obviously sort of part and parcel. I think that we're already seeing sort of more ways to sort of use technology, right, and sort of create more sort of space, more time. Given that we're sort of coming up, I know the one question that we sort of didn't come to, we skipped over, was a real around certification as a barrier. And so I know, you know, a lot of the questions come up is, right, how do you sort of integrate more practice tests, more, right, sort of different sort of pieces? Be interested in sort of what you both have sort of seen or heard on, you know, certification not going away, right? I think we know we want a high bar in terms of quality standpoints, right? I think there's obviously data all over the spectrum in terms of, right, the sort of the bias of some of the certification exam infrastructure, but the fact is, right, it's probably not going away. And so what have you all sort of seen, and how has that been sort of playing out in terms of trying to be helpful in sort of certification as a barrier as itself?
Charity, do you have something to say? Oh, it didn't work this time. Oh, there it is.
Oh, okay, I was gonna say, I left myself unmuted. I was hoping that would help. Okay, good. So it did work.
There you go.
When you talked. You know, certification is, again, we have standards. We want staff to have the proper pedagogy, that have proper training. All of those things we want to keep, right? But maybe just the parts of it that are redundant or unnecessary, because it's not necessarily effective to it doesn't actually produce the data that, let's say, that's being collected isn't necessarily correlated with, a quality educator. So I think a lot has to be studied and done with that. And a lot of the things that have been removed hasn't been able to be proved to have impact on the students. And so I think that's really where you have to go. It's not that you have to try to remove certification or the standards, it's that you have to look at the practices and policies around how to get it, right? And what is allowable. We do have a chapter 224, it's called the pilot program for certifications that staff members can apply for if they're missing one thing. Like, so perhaps they might have had a difficulty with, they didn't have the praxis, they couldn't pass it. We've had situations where candidates just tried to pass and they were just short, a couple points. And there is a limited certificate of eligibility that they can apply for. And if that's all that's missing is that one thing, that's something that the New Jersey Department of Education has made an avenue for. And, there's an example of something where, you take a look at what are the most frequent barriers for people who are applying for certification, and then what specifically are those things and who is it impacting? It's usually it is our applicants of color, right? And then can we do something as an alternative where they can at least get hired? I'm seeing some promise in programs like that, as well as some changes from different bills, but yeah, certification is a big one. I would actually like to hear from Kristen about Drew's, how you're doing this with BloomBoard as far as New Jersey Department of Education certification for these on the job types of training programs. Are the candidates ending up with New Jersey Department of Education certification?
Yeah, so this is it's a registered, and we're looking at both the CE pathway and the CEAS pathway. The AA to BA program that is launching right now is a CEAS pathway, and so that means they will come out of a traditional route. They meet all the requirements of the student teaching and all the boxes that you need to check with that. And that's because we are working with our partners to meet the regulations, but maybe doing it a little bit differently than we've always done it before, right? So there's a lot of words around those words in the regulations that we can work to, and it's not just in the spirit of, it's legitimately, we're doing what we're supposed to be doing according to the regulations. We're just doing it in a different way than we have before. But then we're also thinking about those things that we can't change. So right now, Praxis 2, we can't change. They have to pass the content test. And we know in particular, our elementary candidates who are coming out of our traditional programs, they have to pass 4 content areas, and they're not necessarily being trained in that content. So as we created this program for the undergraduate, we specifically thought about that, and we are building in coursework that prepares them for the kinds of content that they need to teach as an elementary teacher. So it's not just, I got my history major and now I have to take the history or the social studies praxis. This is actually the kind of social studies that I need to teach in a K-6 classroom. And then we're also thinking about, all right, can we level up? So we know that everyone's certified to teach K-6 math. We need middle school math and science teachers. So how can we move them into the 15 credits they need in order to move into the middle school in a subject area and support them in gaining that content knowledge and passing the tests? So, the tests are theoretically aligned to the content that you would be teaching through the NJSLS in schools, and not necessarily the university coursework that would normally happen on the course of things. And I think that's sometimes the disconnect, in addition to some of the other systemic issues in standardized tests. So these are some of the ways that we are thinking about just initial candidate support. And then of course, meeting candidates where they are. We recognize even if you do this course and you work on your skills through Tutoring 240 or the program that we're selecting to help you to do that, you still may need additional support, and we are going to implement that for you.
And I certainly think obviously the more we can get candidates exposure to pre-tests, right, sooner in the program, that's obviously one of these other ways that we've been trying to sort of figure that out. I know we're right at time here. The only thing left on my list we didn't really get into is some of the apprenticeship funding landscape that is actually still a little TBD in New Jersey. And so that's one of these other sort of ways that we're trying to figure out how to drive costs down, that I think is certainly, in the works, but there's still a little bit more to sort of be determined there. But I guess I would sort of just want to sort of be able to sort of turn this over, right? If any final thoughts on, right, sort of the work or any sort of final recommendations for sort of folks in, there was a question if NJ Strides open to charter schools, Charity, just in case you can answer that one and share any final thoughts that you have for the audience here.
I'm always appreciating the interest. We don't have right now, we're just for public school districts, but we do every year consider if we will allow additional districts, perhaps like public charter schools. So now that we are affiliated, we're an affiliate of NJASA, we may have some consideration to think about for future. But right now it's public school districts, but we do appreciate the high interest that we've been receiving from all of the districts that have reached out.
Oh. And Melissa, I think, yes, the NJ Stride is now sort of statewide, so definitely sort of interested and welcome. Dr. Turner, any final thoughts?
I'm excited about the conversations to do things a little differently and how we prepare teachers. It's so needed. The whole system needs an overhaul, and so I'm happy to be in conversation, kind of at the start of that.
Well, thank you all for your time. Really appreciate it. Really good luck with all of your staffing sort of issues and questions. And certainly if you have questions or anything else, I think I've got our sort of final just emails and sort of folks in case everybody sort of needs anything. But if you have any questions, sort of you can certainly reach out to us, right? We'll follow up with sort of maybe then you've got our emails here if you want to take a screenshot or sort of run that through. But thank you so much for your time, everyone. Really appreciate it.